They said Christmas wouldn't be the same without me. My son's exact words. I had been sitting at my kitchen table when he called. A Tuesday in early November, the kind of gray afternoon that makes the whole house feel underwater. The radiator was ticking. My tea had gone cold. I had been looking at the same crossword puzzle for 20 minutes without filling in a single square. His voice came through bright and a little rushed, the way it always does when he's calling between things. "Hey, Mom, you doing anything for Christmas this year?" I told him I hadn't decided yet. That was not entirely true. I had already planned it down to the grocery list. A small ham, a sweet potato casserole, the cranberry sauce my husband used to request every year even though nobody else liked it. I'd planned to make it anyway. For the memory of it, but I didn't say that. He said the kids were asking about me. He said the house would feel empty without me there. He said, and this is the part I keep turning over, "You should be here, Mom. You belong here." I hadn't heard that in a long time. Not, "Can you make it?" or "We'd love to have you if it's not too much trouble," but "You belong here." Present tense. Certain. So I said yes. I booked the flight myself. He didn't offer, and I didn't wait. Round trip, direct, Phoenix Sky Harbor, December 23rd through December 27th. 4 nights. I paid with my credit card and didn't flinch at the price. Some things are worth the cost, I told myself. Family is worth the cost. I started preparing 3 weeks out. Not because I'm anxious by nature, but because I wanted to do it right. I bought gifts carefully, a leather journal for my son because he'd mentioned wanting to write more. A silk scarf for my daughter-in-law in a deep green she always complimented on other women. Books for my grandchildren, chosen by what I actually knew about them, not what was on a bestseller shelf. I wrapped everything in brown paper and twine the way my mother used to. I also packed the ornament. It was a glass ball. Hand-painted. Deep blue, with a ring of gold stars around the middle. My husband bought it our first Christmas together. $1,981 at a little craft fair in Vermont. He'd paid $11 for it, which was a lot for us then. Every year after, it was the first thing I unwrapped and the last thing I put away. When he died 3 years ago, I almost didn't put the tree up at all, but I did, and I hung the ornament first, same as always. I brought it because I thought there might be room for it on their tree. A small piece of him in their house for the holiday. I packed it in a sock, nestled between 2 sweaters. The flight was smooth. I had a window seat and watched the country flatten and then brown as we moved south and west. A young woman beside me was knitting something small and yellow, a baby gift, she said, for her sister. We talked for a little while and then didn't, which was exactly right. We landed at 4:15. The airport was loud and warm. That particular holiday chaos of rolling suitcases and people wearing reindeer antler headbands. I claimed my bag, stepped outside, and felt the dry Phoenix air hit me like a warm hand. After Ohio in December, it felt almost tropical. I texted my son. Landed. Bags with me. Heading to arrival's pickup. 3 dots appeared. Then, running a few minutes behind, traffic. Be there soon. I found a bench near the curb and sat. I watched a man in a pilot's uniform get ambushed by 3 small children. I watched a teenager hold a handmade sign that said "Welcome Home Dad" in crooked letters. I watched an older woman about my age get folded into a hug by who I assumed was her daughter, both of them crying a little and laughing at themselves for crying. I pulled my coat tighter, even though it wasn't cold. 30 minutes passed. I texted again. Still at pickup area, door 7. Almost there. He wrote back. Another 20 minutes. I called. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I sat on that bench with my suitcase between my knees and watched the sky turn a deep bruised orange over the parking structure. When his car finally appeared 47 minutes after I'd landed, I stood and raised my hand. He pulled up and got out quickly, came around the hood. He was wearing a polo shirt. Tan. Comfortable. He looked like someone who had not been worried. Mom, sorry. Sorry we lost track of time. He hugged me briefly, took my suitcase. I got in the back seat. My daughter-in-law turned from the passenger seat and gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. So good you're finally here, she said. My granddaughter, Tyler, 13, gangly, already taller than me, was in the back with his earbuds in. He pulled one out. Hey, Grandma. Then it went back in. I watched the city pass outside the window. Phoenix at Christmas is an odd thing. Lights on palm trees, inflatable Santas next to cactuses, bright and strange and warm. I had visited 4 times over the years and it had never quite felt like Christmas to me, but I had never said so. The house was a 40-minute drive in traffic. Large, beige, with a 3-car garage, and very little shade. I had always found it impersonal in the way that houses can be when they're furnished by a store and lived in by schedule. But it was their home, and I respected that. My daughter-in-law opened the front door, and that's when I noticed the suitcases. 2 of them, large, sitting open in the entryway. Women's things spilling out a curling iron, a stack of folded jeans, a cosmetics bag with a broken zipper, a man's sneakers kicked to the side, a jacket I didn't recognize draped over the stair railing. Before I could ask, a woman came around the corner from the kitchen. Mid-30s, dark hair, my daughter-in-law's nose. She was carrying a glass of white wine. Oh, you must be Daniel's mom. She extended the free hand. I'm Kristen, Cheryl's sister, and that's Marcus in the kitchen. I shook her hand. I looked at my son. He had that particular expression of someone waiting to see if the thing they didn't explain is going to become a problem. They surprised us, my daughter-in-law said brightly. Flew in this morning. Isn't that wonderful? I said that was nice. I said it was nice to meet her. Then I asked where I'd be sleeping. The pause was small, but it was there. My son cleared his throat. So about that. We were going to put you in the guest room, obviously. But Kristen and Marcus kind of took that. And we figured you wouldn't mind taking Tyler's room. Since Tyler's going to camp out in the den, he kept talking. I heard the words. I processed them. The way you process something you understand intellectually but haven't quite let land yet. I was being moved from the room I had always stayed in, the one with the window that faces the yard, the one where I had folded and refolded that blue quilt 4 Christmases in a row, to a 13-year-old boy's room with sports trophies on the shelf and a twin bed with a low railing, because Cheryl's sister had surprised them. I nodded. I said that would be fine. I carried my own suitcase up the stairs. Tyler's room smelled like deodorant and old sneakers. The bed was pushed against the wall. I sat on the edge of it and looked at the trophies: baseball, soccer, one for something called Academic Challenge. There was a poster above the desk of a basketball player I didn't recognize. A charging cable curled on the floor. I unpacked slowly. There was nowhere to hang my dresses, so I laid them across the back of the desk chair. I put my toiletries on the edge of the dresser, pushing aside a bottle of cologne and a retainer case. I put the blue ornament, still wrapped in its sock, into the front pocket of my suitcase. I washed my hands and went downstairs. Dinner that night was pizza, ordered in. Boxes spread across the kitchen island, everyone eating, standing up or perching on bar stools. Kristen talked a great deal about a renovation she and Marcus were planning, an open kitchen, some kind of waterfall countertop. Marcus nodded agreeably and reached for another slice. Tyler looked at his phone. My son refilled his daughter-in-law's glass. Nobody asked about my flight. Nobody asked about Ohio, about the winter, about how I'd been since August when we'd last spoken. I volunteered that the leaves had been beautiful this year, late and very orange. Nobody responded. I ate 2 slices of cheese pizza and went to bed at 9:30, not because I was tired, but because there was no other place to be. I lay in Tyler's bed with the ceiling fan making its slow circle above me, and I did not sleep for a long time. I thought about the $11 my husband had paid for that ornament. I thought about the phone call in November, "You belong here," and how I had taken those 3 words and carried them for 6 weeks like a small lantern. I thought about the way my daughter-in-law had said, "So good you're finally here," in the tone of someone saying something polite. I had been here for 4 hours, and I had already been rerouted, ignored, and thanked for understanding about a situation I was never asked to understand. And still the thought that rose in me wasn't anger. It was something quieter and more honest. It was recognition. I had seen this before, in pieces, over years, and I had always found a reason not to name it. In the morning, I woke before everyone. 6:15. I put on my robe and went quietly downstairs. The kitchen was dim and still, pizza boxes stacked by the sink. Someone had left a wine glass on the counter with a ring of red at the bottom. I washed it before I even made coffee, out of a habit I couldn't seem to unlearn. I found the coffee and started a pot. I sat at the kitchen table while it brewed and watched the yard outside fill with thin, early light. There was a small lemon tree in the corner of the yard that I had always liked. It looked exactly the same. My son came down at 7:30, surprised to see me. "Oh, Mom, you're up." He poured coffee, didn't offer me a refill. We sat for a few minutes. He checked his phone twice. I asked what the plan was for Christmas Eve. He said Cheryl was thinking they'd do a big dinner and that Kristen had offered to make her lamb thing. He said he thought they'd open gifts in the morning. Christmas Day. He said they might go to a neighbor's party in the evening. I asked if there was anything he needed me to do, any way I could help with dinner. He said Cheryl had it handled, that I should just relax. Relax, as if I had been straining. I nodded and finished my coffee. That afternoon, while everyone was out, my son and daughter-in-law at the neighbors for some kind of pre-holiday gathering that I was told about after they'd already left, I sat in the living room with a book I wasn't reading and looked at their Christmas tree. It was large, artificial, very symmetrical. White lights, matching silver ornaments, coordinated red bows at even intervals. It looked like a tree in a catalog, lovely in its way, nothing out of place. My ornament was still in the suitcase upstairs. I thought about taking it out and asking if I could add it. I thought about how that conversation might go. I put the thought away. I called my granddaughter Sophie instead. She was my son's daughter from his first marriage, 24, finishing her 2nd year of a nursing program in Portland. She was the one who called just to talk. She was the one who, 2 Septembers ago, had mailed me a postcard from the coast with nothing on the back except thinking of you, Grandma, and a small drawing of a wave. She answered on the 2nd ring. "Grandma, how's Phoenix?" I told her it was warm. I told her the flight was fine. I paused for a moment, deciding how much to say. She heard the pause. She always did. "Are you okay?" I said I was fine. Then I said, "Actually," and I told her. Not everything, not dramatically, just the suitcases in the entryway, the room, the pizza boxes, the way nobody had asked a single question about my life. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Grandma. That's not okay." She didn't offer explanations. She didn't say, "Maybe they were just busy," or "I'm sure they didn't mean it." She just said, "It wasn't okay." And I can't tell you how much difference that made. We talked for 40 minutes. She told me about her clinicals, about a patient who had made her laugh, about the second-hand armchair she'd just bought for her apartment that she was convinced was the most comfortable object in the world. She asked about my garden, about the book club I joined at the library. She asked if the hydrangeas had come back after the hard frost last spring. "They had," I said. "Better than ever." "That's so you," she said. "Things come back for you." I didn't answer because my throat had tightened unexpectedly. Christmas Eve dinner was lamb and roasted vegetables, made by Kristen, who cooked with a lot of commentary about the process. Marcus opened 2 bottles of wine. My son put on a playlist. My daughter-in-law wore a red dress and looked beautiful and relaxed in her home. Tyler ate quickly and disappeared. I helped clear the table and was told 3 times that I didn't have to. At the table, the conversation moved between people I barely knew, a story about a trip Kristen and Marcus had taken, a joke about someone from their friend group, a disagreement about a television show. I sat and listened. I smiled at the right moments. I asked a question once, and the answer was given quickly before the conversation swept on. My son looked at me once across the table just for a second, and I thought I saw something in his face, a flicker of something that might have been discomfort, or might have been nothing. He looked away and reached for his wine. After dessert, a pear tart Kristen had also made, I excused myself and went upstairs. I sat on the edge of Tyler's bed and opened my suitcase. I took out the ornament, unwrapped it from the sock, and held it in my palm. The gold stars caught the light from the bedside lamp. I turned it slowly. Every version of our life together. I wrapped it back up. Carefully. The way you pack something for a long trip. Then I opened my notebook, the small one I always keep in my carry-on, and I wrote for a long time. Not feelings, exactly. More like a ledger. Things I had done. Things I had given. Things I had adjusted myself around without being asked, so smoothly and so often that I had confused it with love. The holiday plane tickets I'd bought every year because he never offered to come to me. The times I'd stayed in hotels rather than say the spare room would be fine. The medical bill, 2 years ago his, not mine, that I'd quietly covered when he mentioned they were stretched. The $4,000 I'd wired when the water heater failed, no question asked. Christmas gifts every year, thoughtfully chosen, carefully wrapped. Returned texts 2 days late. Phone calls I initiated 90% of the time. When I finished writing, I looked at the list for a long time. Not with bitterness, with the strange, clean feeling of finally seeing something clearly that you have been looking at sideways for years. I flew home on December 26th, 1 day early. I told my son at breakfast that I had a conflict not true, and that I needed to change my flight. He said he was sorry to hear that. He did not ask what the conflict was. He did not ask me to stay. He drove me to the airport. We talked about nothing in particular the whole way. In the departures lane, he got out and put my suitcase on the curb. We hugged. He said to call when I landed. I said I would. He drove away before I reached the door. I found a coffee shop inside the terminal, bought a plain black coffee and a slice of banana bread that I didn't really want, and sat down. My flight wasn't for 3 hours. I opened the notebook again. I started a different list this time. My house, paid off, fully mine, 3 bedrooms and a yard where things came back after hard frosts. My pension, my accounts, my name on every document and deed. My health, mostly good. Better than I deserved given the years of putting everyone else first. My mind, sharp, still sharper, I thought, than it had been in years, because clarity has a way of arriving when you finally allow it. And Sophie. Her voice on the phone, in a stranger's too quiet kitchen, saying, "That's not okay." I finished the coffee and boarded the plane. Ohio was gray and cold when I landed. Familiar gray, my gray. I drove home from the airport with the heat on and the radio off. My street looked the same as always, identical houses, bare trees, the Andersons' Christmas lights still up on the roofline. Inside, my house smelled like the lavender sachet in the front closet and something faintly woody from the baseboard heaters. I set my suitcase down. I did not unpack immediately. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, and sat down at the table where I had taken that phone call in November. "You belong here," he had said. I looked around my kitchen, the blue curtains I had sewn myself 15 years ago, the hooks by the door where I hung my coat and my keys every single day, the small clay bowl on the counter that Sophie made in a pottery class at 12 and gave me because she said the lopsided shape reminded her of me, not broken, just interesting. I was already home. The next morning, I was at my bank when it opened. I asked to speak with an account manager, and a calm young woman named Patricia brought me to a small office that smelled like new carpet and old coffee. I told her I needed to review all of my recurring transfers. She pulled up the account. There were several. A monthly transfer to my son's checking. I had started it 3 years ago when he mentioned things were tight, and it had simply continued, the way things do when you never revisit them. A payment toward a credit card account I had co-signed years ago. A contribution to a college savings plan for Tyler that I had set up when he was born. Generous then, still ongoing. Keep the college fund, I said. Stop the rest. Patricia nodded. She typed carefully. She asked if I was sure about the checking transfer. I said I was. She didn't press. There was also a name on file as an authorized user for certain account access. My son's. Remove that, I said. She removed it. When I walked out into the December air, something had shifted. Not healed, not resolved, just repositioned. Like furniture you've moved to where it was always meant to be. I went home and called my attorney. I'd used him for years, a steady, unhurried man named Robert, who had handled my husband's estate and my own will, which hadn't been updated since 2009. His receptionist put me through in under 2 minutes. I told him I wanted to make changes. He didn't seem surprised. He said he could see me the following week. That evening, I took the ornament out again. I hung it on my own tree, the small one I put up every year on a table in the front window, strands of colored lights, a mismatched collection of ornaments accumulated over 5 decades of Christmases. It fit perfectly. It always had. I stood back and looked at it for a while. The gold stars, the deep blue glass. There you are, I thought. Sophie called on New Year's Eve, her voice bright, a little breathless, calling from a party she'd stepped out of for a few minutes because she wanted to wish me Happy New Year in person, not by text. We talked for 20 minutes. She told me about a professor she admired, about a patient she kept thinking about the coast in winter, cold and relentless and beautiful. I told her about the hydrangeas, about a book I'd just started, about the neighbor's dog that had taken to sitting on my porch in the afternoons as if it lived there. "Grandma," she said at some point, "how was Christmas, really?" I told her. More than I had on the phone from Phoenix. Not dramatically, just honestly, the suitcases in the entryway, the room, the dinner where nobody asked me anything, the drive to the airport. She was quiet for a long time. "I'm really sorry," she said finally. "You deserved better. You've always deserved better." I said thank you. I meant it in a way that surprised even me. She asked if she could come visit in February. She had a long weekend and she wanted to see me. She wanted to see the house in winter, she said, and she wanted my recipe for the apple cake that she had been trying to replicate for 3 years without success. "Of course," I said. "Come." I met with Robert the attorney on a Thursday morning in early January. His office was a 2-story brick building downtown, same place for 30 years, the kind of solid, unhurried space that makes important decisions feel appropriate rather than drastic. He sat across from me with a legal pad, the way he always had. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked a few questions. Then he wrote for a while. "I want everything in a trust," I told him. "I want Sophie as the sole beneficiary. Education, housing, healthcare, she can access funds for any of that. Everything else transfers to her when I'm gone." He nodded. "I want my son removed from the will entirely. Not as punishment. I want that to be clear in the language. I want it stated as a choice, not a penalty." He wrote it down. "I also want a letter attached. A personal one. Not legal. Just honest." He told me he could include a statement of intent. He told me the letter couldn't be contested. He said it would simply be there, explaining in my own words, in case anyone needed to understand. I said that was enough. I didn't need anyone to be convinced. I just needed to be clear. By the time I signed the preliminary forms and walked out into the thin January sun, it was done. Or as done as these things get, until the ink dries and the notary stamps it, and it becomes something permanent and real. I stopped at the bakery on the way home, bought a coffee and a slice of brown butter cake, sat at the small table by the window and ate it slowly, watching the street. There was a woman outside pushing a stroller with one hand and talking on the phone with the other, managing both with the particular competence of someone who has learned to do everything at once. There was a man in a heavy coat scraping his car windshield, determined, patient. There were two teenagers walking in the same direction without speaking to each other, earbuds in, comfortable in the shared silence. Ordinary life. Moving on, ordinary business. I thought about the phone call that was probably coming. I had spoken to my son once, since Christmas briefly, carefully, the day after I got home. He had said he hoped the flight was okay. I had said it was fine. Neither of us said the real thing. I knew that couldn't last. The call came on a Tuesday night in the second week of January. I was at the kitchen table with a crossword, the same crossword ritual, but different now, easier somehow, the answers coming more readily than they had in months. I answered. His voice was careful, rehearsed in the way voices get when someone has been thinking about what to say for too long. Mom, I've been talking to Robert's office about the estate paperwork. I set down my pen. I know, I said. A long pause. What's going on? Can you just tell me what's going on? I thought about how to say it. I had thought about it for weeks, and still the right words are not the easy words. The easy words are the ones that smooth things over, that leave room for everyone to pretend nothing has changed. I had been using easy words for years. I've been thinking about patterns, I said. Not one Christmas, not one airport, not one missed call. Patterns, the kind that build up so slowly you convince yourself they're normal. He started to say something. I kept going, gently. I'm not angry. I want you to hear that. I'm not trying to hurt you, but I've been quietly funding your life for years and telling myself it was love, and maybe part of it was. But part of it was also fear. Fear of being less necessary, less wanted, less included if I stopped. Mom, you invited me for Christmas, and I flew across the country on my own dime and slept in a 13-year-old's room so your sister-in-law's boyfriend could have the guest room. I kept my voice level, and nobody thought to mention that before I booked my flight. Silence. I didn't know, he said quietly. About the room. Cheryl handled. I know you didn't plan it, I said. That's actually the part that matters most. You didn't plan it because it didn't occur to anyone to think carefully about whether I was comfortable. That's the pattern. Not cruelty, just the particular way you stop really seeing someone after long enough. He didn't answer for a while. When he spoke again, his voice was different, smaller. I'm sorry, Mom. I believed him. In that moment, I believed he meant it. I know, I said. Is there anything? He stopped. Started again. Is there a way to fix it? I looked at the crossword on the table. 7 across. The act of starting over. I had already filled it in. Renewal. That's not a question I can answer for you, I said. But I want you to know I'm not disappearing. I'm just done rearranging myself to fit a space that was never quite made for me. If that changes, I'll know. We talked for a few more minutes. We didn't resolve anything, because some things don't resolve, they just settle, like the house after a hard winter, into a new understanding of what it can and can't hold. After I hung up, I sat for a long time without moving. The radiator ticked, the refrigerator hummed. Outside, a car moved slowly down the street, and its headlights swept across the wall, that brief traveling light. Sophie arrived in February on a Friday afternoon, her canvas bag over one shoulder and a box of chocolates from a place in Portland that she said was the only one worth trusting. She came off the train, looking tired in the way of someone who lives fully and sleeps insufficiently, and when she saw me waiting on the platform, she walked faster. We hugged for a long time. Neither of us said much. We didn't need to. She stayed for 3 days. We baked the apple cake twice, once to remind her of what I actually did, once because we ate most of the first one before it fully cooled. We played cards. We took a long walk on Saturday when the sun came out briefly, through the neighborhood and past the park and along the edge of the small lake that freezes every January and thaws every March, reliable as anything. She told me about her patients, not the hard ones, mostly, but the ones who made her feel like she'd chosen right. She told me about a woman in her 70s who had recovered from something that shouldn't have been survivable and who, on her last day in the ward, had asked Sophie for a piece of paper and written down the name of every nurse who had cared for her. She said she wanted them to know she saw them, Sophie told me, like it was the most important thing she could do before she left. I thought about that. On Sunday, her last morning, we sat at the kitchen table with our coffee and didn't talk much. She was watching the backyard, the bare hydrangeas, the lemongrass I'd cut back to nothing in November, the little iron bird feeder that was currently occupied by 2 arguing sparrows. "Will they really come back?" she asked. "The hydrangeas. Every year," I said. "By June, you won't believe they were ever bare." She smiled at that. She wrapped her hands around her mug. She said, "I want you to know something." She paused, choosing the words carefully the way she did when she meant them. "You're not a backup plan for me. You're not an obligation. I call you because you're one of the people I most want to talk to in the world. I just want you to know that." My throat tightened the same way it had on the phone in November. Different feeling, same location. "Thank you," I said. "That means more than I can explain." "You don't have to explain," she said. She left on the 11:40 train. I stood on the platform until it curved out of sight, and then I walked back to my car in the cold quiet of a February morning, and I drove home slowly, taking the long way, past the park, past the lake. The house was still when I walked in. That particular stillness that follows a full house. Not empty, exactly, but resting. I hung up my coat. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table. The ornament was on my small tree in the front window, catching the weak winter light, gold stars on deep blue glass, my husband's $11 and 42 years and every Christmas I had ever lived through, good ones and hard ones and the ones in between. I looked at it for a long time. Then I opened my notebook and wrote the last thing I needed to write the letter for the trust, the one that would be there after I was gone, in case anyone wanted to understand. To whoever is reading this, I spent many years being quietly available. I was useful. I was generous. And I told myself that was the same as being loved. It is not. Usefulness fades. What I was looking for was simpler than that: someone who would show up when there was nothing to gain from it. Contact. Someone who would save my room. Sophie did that. She did it in small ways, for years, before either of us would have called it anything. She called on unremarkable Tuesdays. She sent postcards from coasts I had never seen. She asked about the hydrangeas. This is not punishment. This is precision. I am giving what I have to the person who gave back. If that feels like a loss to you, I understand. I spent a long time feeling that loss myself, but I found that on the other side of it, past the waiting and the adjusting and the careful hoping, there is something steadier. Not happiness, exactly. Something quieter. Something you stop reaching for and start simply having. I am still here. I always was. I put the pen down. Read it over once. Folded it and sealed it in an envelope marked for Robert's file. Then I poured myself another cup of tea, sat down in front of my window, and watched the sparrows at the feeder, arguing and fluttering and claiming their small, cold corner of the world. And I thought, yes, that is exactly right. You claim it. You don't wait for it to be offered. You light the candle yourself. If this story found you today, you already know why. Someone out there is sitting in a room that was never really made for them, being grateful for less than they were promised. You don't have to stay there. You don't have to explain it either. Just begin right where you are, with what you still have, which may be more than you think. Please share this if it means something to you. Someone else needs to hear it today.